Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another fantastic episode of Bloodlines. It's been a long time since we've seen you, primarily because we've been gone for about a month, something like that. Yeah,
and I've just come out of hibernation. I've been away for a while, but I'm back.
Yeah, that's true. She's in front of the camera. Finally.
That's what adulting has. Just being an adult, that happens.
And speaking of adults, we're actually talking to one right now.
Wow.
He's actually on the other side. He has his own camera. Mr. Al Dawson of Earache Records.
What is up, everyone?
How you doing, Al?
Good. Good to see you, buddy.
Likewise.
Yeah.
This is a long time coming. I
Yes.
actually used to intern here at this beloved place.
Was
actually,
this, what, 7 years ago, I think?
yeah, 7 years ago. It was actually in the room across the way when it was the actual warehouse. And yeah, it was.
And we tortured him daily.
Yeah, it was 3 months of hazing, as you so
Well,
delicately
you know what
put
it is? Is people are too sensitive these days, and we try to breed some insensitivity into you, Make
It worked.
Toughen you up a little bit.
Former Derek was very easy to haze, I'm sure.
Right. But he's a different man now. He's all growing up
It's
now.
the beard and the hat.
No, it's also experience,
Yeah, that's true. That too.
Yeah.
That
Very
too.
true. Yeah.
All right, I'll give you
All
that
good.
one. He's
All
just
good.
being nice because he has.
So
his
what are
own
we
camera.
doing here? We're talking. And
Yeah.
This is more for people who want to get into the industry or for bands. What's our angle?
This is actually for both. This is
Okay.
primarily we're just gonna dig into your brain and gather
That's
some
a scary
knowledge.
thought.
Yeah, I know, right? It's scary.
It is scary. Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in your answers.
Okay.
I know that there's going to be a lot of quips here and there, which I'm excited for. But yeah, definitely, this is definitely about especially for New York City locals. They want to get that information. So here we are with you.
Well, I mean, these days it's everywhere,
That's the problem.
I mean,
it's
look at-
everywhere, but nobody could find it.
Well, yeah, but look at like a band like Behemoth who just sold out PlayStation Theater like 2 weeks back, whatever it was.
Yeah.
If you had to bet 28 years ago, like who's going to be the next up and coming band that's going to pack out, the arenas and that, this band from New York, this band from LA, this band from London, or this band from Poland. You go, Polish kids, they got no chance.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I'm
And
saying?
they're proving them wrong now.
Yeah,
Go
absolutely.
figure. And I mean, we'll just go jump right into the nitty gritty because
Let's do it.
we can all talk about this
Let's
all
do
day.
it.
So, we want our viewers outside of New York City to get an idea of who you are first. So
Okay.
we're gonna go way back in time.
Yep.
And let's start before you joined Earache.
Absolutely. All right, so here's a little geography lesson for you. I am an Australian, and I am from the most isolated capital city in the world. It's called Perth, and it is on the west coast. Everybody in America knows the Gold Coast, Sydney, Melbourne. That's all that side of the country. I'm the other side of the country. It's actually quicker for me to fly to, say, somewhere like Singapore than to fly to Sydney or Melbourne. That's how far away it is.
Ouch.
And it's pretty much like the same size land mass as the lower 48 in the U.S., yet more people live in California than our entire country. So it's a beautiful country. It's very, very isolated, though. Like, it's basically, here's the world, and we're, like,
down there.
down there somewhere. So I knew that I wanted to do something in music, but to do so, I knew that even if I moved to Sydney and Melbourne, your options are still very, very limited. For example, my home state, you can fit the state of Texas, which is one of your bigger ones. I mean, forget Alaska, 3 times into my home state. Yeah, we're in Queens, Long Island City, Queens right now. 2 million people live in my state. 2.2 million live in the county of Queens.
Jeez.
So straight away, I knew that I had to put myself into a position where there's more opportunity. And that would either going to be, at that point, my favorite bands were all English or American. The whole international scene, I mean, there was stuff happening in Brazil and there was stuff happening in Finland and stuff like that, but it hadn't exploded yet. You know what I'm saying? So I knew I had to do that. My mother was Scottish, and they had this weird law because, the British colonies and all that, that if one of your parents is English or Scottish or whatever, you had the right to come and live there and vote and buy land or whatever without having to do the whole green card immigration process type of thing. So I was like, I could go to America and like find some girl and do there's a movie in the 80s.
Marry for a green card.
No, there's a movie in the 80s called Green Card, where like an American girl marries a French guy, and after they get tested, what's the favorite toothpaste, and I don't know, and all that. So I could either do that route or go to England. So I went to England in '86, and I went all around the country visiting all my pen friends, because that's what we did then. There was no internet. You had to send a letter off and wait 2 weeks for it to come back and whatever else.
Yes, people, there was this thing called mail back in the 80s.
Snail mail.
Snail mail. I was just going to say that, too. Yep.
Exactly. So I did that. I went to stay with all my pen friends all around England. I went to like Manchester, Liverpool, East End of London, And I ended up in Nottingham. And the people who I stayed with, boyfriend and girlfriend, they had an apartment in the city center above a shopping mall. It was called council housing, kind of like a what do you call it here, like government housing and whatever.
So public housing.
Public housing, thank you.
Yes.
And I stayed with them, and they're like, look, no offense, we just had someone from Italy the week beforehand. We got people from Japan next week. You can stay 1 week, that's fine. But if you want to stay longer in Nottingham, you can stay with our buddy Digby. And I'd already heard of Digby's name in the tape.
Digby Pearson.
He's the owner of Earache, tape trading scene. So I ended up staying at his place like 4 or 5 weeks. And I thought of all the places in England, a lot of it in the 80s was a shithole. I mean, Liverpool, I love the people from Liverpool. But even in the 80s, this is a country that doesn't have guns. All of the stores are behind bulletproof glass and stuff.
Oh, wow.
That's how. So it was rough back then, sort of thing.
It's like our South Bronx.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. So
Oh, we're relating. I got it.
yeah, so I was like, Nottingham's the best place because London was just too big and too like that, like a deer in the headlights for me at that point. I ended up mastering London and knowing every little road and driving all around it all the time. But at least at 86, that was too much. I thought Nottingham was a good place. I moved back to Australia, took every shit job I could to get money, to earn money to make the move, because it's a big deal to move from here to all the way over there. And in that time, Dig did the first couple of Earache records. The third record was Napalm Death Scum. He mailed out 8 promo copies. It went to #1 on the British independent charts, and basically as the band imploded, the guitarist went off and formed Godflesh. The other guitarist went off and formed Carcass. The singer left and formed Cathedral. And that basically built the label.
Jeez, that doesn't even sound bad. It's like these,
Yeah.
everybody
Well, I mean,
left and made like
At the
these
time,
genius.
he was bending over backwards to try and keep the band together.
Oh,
and
of
all
course.
that.
Yeah.
Because you don't have the hindsight, like all of these other legendary bands are going to come
That's
from
totally
this
true.
one spark, But that's what happened, and I moved over, and he was looking for people who had a world view. So he's like, you got to come work with me, And I was like, so it's like, you could say, well, it's lucky for you, right time, right place, but you have to put yourself in that position.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, you actually kind of just answered what we were about to ask, because I was going to say, what was the driving force behind wanting to represent Earache Records,
Right.
North American division?
Well, here's the thing. Growing up in, as I said, my little remote city, whatever, I had friends. Here's another thing. There's an art guy called Pushead. He's done all the artwork for Metallica. He's done Misfits, Exploited, everybody over the years. I think even Aerosmith, Motley Crue, he's done T-shirt designs for. He did a compilation in '85 called Cleanse the Bacteria. And on the thanks list is Digby Pearson and Al Dawson. We never met each other for another year. He was in England, I was in Australia, but we were already kind of moving in those circles. And for me, like I had an apartment in my city's downtown, and every day people would come in, and I'm like, dude, I just got this tape from Brazil, man. Oh, fucking hell, you got to hear it. And I'll just turn people on to, because I'd be excited about this new music and underground music, like Destruction from Germany or whatever. And
I wish they would come back. I miss them.
Yeah, but I was putting this on, and really I was doing my job before understanding, like, hey, you could actually make a job of this and be paid for sharing the stoke with everybody. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you're finding shit, and you're like, this is cool, and I'm turning my friends onto this cool music. And that's basically, in a sense, there's all contracts and spreadsheets and all that bullshit as well now, but it's still the same thing. I go into Warner Brothers and go, right, we got this new music, and I'm doing the same thing I did as a dumb kid, but it's on a more professional level now. So it's kind of happening before I realized it was happening, if that makes any sense. Yeah?
Yeah, it does make sense. To me, it looks like, right place, right time, but everything fell into place, and
Right.
it just snowballed.
Absolutely.
And so, we have our second question here for you. I'm like,
Yeah.
back then, your roster was known for housing like really heavy music,
Yep.
and so fast forward to the present, the label opened its doors to alternative blues rock.
Right.
Like acts like Rival Sons, Black Cherry Smoke, the White Blackberry
yeah.
Smoke. Sorry,
No,
Black
it's
Cherry.
it's confusing because there's like Blackstone Cherry and there's
Yeah.
all these other bands as well,
So, but and then you had the White Buffalo, who were
Yep.
actually featured on Sons of Anarchy for a couple of episodes. and the temperance movement. So all who are currently on your artist roster. So what was it like for Earache when you decided to branch out to alternative and blues?
Here's my point on this: is Digby the owner of Earache? Ultimately, Earache is Digby's vision. It's his company. It's if he's excited about something, he's going to sign it. But even in the early days of Earache, we had experimental bands. We had jazz saxophonist John Zorn. We did 2 albums by him. Bands like Godflesh was industrial, which was not death metal or grindcore.
Yeah.
We had in the mid '90s, we did this extreme techno shit as well. Like whatever he's excited about is what we're gonna do. But he was a drummer, so whenever we get like, here's the new demo from Carcass, here's the new demo from Napalm Death, he'd be like, I'll be listening to the guitar riffs. I'm a guitar guy. He'd be like, listen what he's doing on the drums there. So that was his first, like, his natural thing. What he would go for is the drums, right? Mm-hmm. As it went on, he's like, guitars, like, man, listen to that guy's riff. Listen to the guitar riff. But if you think of the early stuff of Earache, it's like, the last thing that Dig really got into was vocals as a musical instrument, right? So over time, if you track it in the 2000s, we started doing the thrash revival. And after that, we started doing almost like power metal or the new wave of British heavy metal style bands. We had a band called White Wizard, and one of the guys,
I got some of their records.
yeah, but one of the guys, Wyatt, he had like an 8-octave range or whatever, and Diggs all of a sudden was like, shit, like vocals, dude. Like, that became much more of a focus for him. So when we found Rival Sons, it was like, okay, I mean, in some ways, a lot of the traditional Earache fans are like, oh, what a pussy band, like weak, whatever. But for us going into radio stations and TV things, like, oh my God, this is so extreme.
Yeah.
So it just depends. I mean, actually, I had a conference call once with this ad agency. It's like 20 of these, like, Harvard nerds or whatever gathered around a box. Like, we're doing this new launch campaign for this new liquor, and it's going to be extreme lifestyles. And we found the most extreme band in the world, and it's one of your bands, Al. And I'm thinking, like, Anal Cunt, Wormrot.
Deicide.
Yeah, Deicide. I'm going through all my list. I'm like, what's the band? He's like, Rival Sons. Oh my God, we heard them. We couldn't. And I'm like, okay, yeah, they are the most extreme. Like, you go along with it, whatever. But to them, that was the most extreme thing they ever heard.
I'm sorry, that's just
no,
that's
I know,
just
but
really like,
it's everybody's yardstick is different.
yeah,
Whatever,
naturally,
but to me, the whole thing with us segging into that, and let's keep in mind, we still do Vector, we still do Wormrot, we still do that stuff. But for us, it was a natural, organic progression as Diggs' focus went from drumming to guitars to vocalists.
So you pretty much went from instruments to genres, and that just made more sense to him.
Right, but if you also want to look at it in a different way, blues rock and all that sort of thing was really the precursor to heavy metal. Black Sabbath and that was speeded up blues or whatever. Led Zeppelin, just turn it up more, play it a bit faster. And, that progresses to that. So, in a sense, we've almost come full circle,
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, essentially, but, going with bands that you had back in the 90s, it's like this is a complete change. Right. So, I mean, for me, honestly, when I walked through the doors, I was like, okay, I've seen things, but, man, this is really loud. Like,
right.
8 o'clock in the morning, we got, Deicide playing, or we have Morbid Angel playing, or we have Carcass playing. I remember I didn't hear of Carcass till I was 22. And,
wow.
I was a late bloomer. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Don't be sorry.
But, I could hear the elitists just like, ew.
Whatever.
No. But so, even, our colleague Nick would just be like, you never heard of that? Here. Check. And it was just like, okay.
But again, that's sharing the stoke. It's about...
It was a great share.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Does that answer the question? Does that make sense?
Absolutely,
Good,
yeah. I mean,
good.
this was like a natural progression. I mean, it just went from instruments to vocals.
But also, too, we're at a time now where the guys who are heading ad agencies or syncing stuff into TV and film were people who were maybe 20 when Napalm came out and Carcass came out, whatever, and now they're like, I want to bring some of this to the masses or whatever, There was I'm a huge fan of the Alien films, and they did one called Prometheus.
Yes.
And I'm like, this is like the
movie.
origin story. They called me up, like, we want to use Godflesh on the commercials for it. And I'm like, all right. So we did the deal, and it was actually like a week before the commercials aired. It was really last minute. And I came home drunk one night, and I turned on the TV just to chill out.
And there it is.
The ad's on, and it's just like, dun, dun.
Yeah,
And I'm
that's.
like,
I remember seeing that commercial.
And I'm
That's literally all
like,
it is.
what is this? I'm like, wait a minute. It's Godflesh, but instead of using a riff, they just use one note. That's all they wanted.
Oh, that's very disappointing, actually.
I mean, it is, but it's also cool. But it's also like, there's someone there like, dude, man, we got to get Godflesh, man, and all that. That's why they did it.
Let's just use one solid strum, and
we had Sleep on that TV show True Detective.
Yeah.
And that was like in the biker bar scene, and they're walking away from the bar, and you can kind of like, what is that? Yeah, shit, Sleep. But it's so mixed down in the mix or whatever. But the point is, someone's like, dude, we got to get Sleep. It's almost like they paid for the bragging rights, like we got all this cool shit on the thing. So to me, all that's fun.
Yeah.
When Sega launched the Genesis system, if you remember that,
I do,
with Sonic the Hedgehog and all that.
Yep.
They had 2 songs for the commercials. One was like a kiddie song to fit in with Sonic, like or whatever.
I remember
the other
those
one
commercials.
they used a John Zorn track because they wanted something. Because Sonic is so fast and boom, boom, boom like this.
So let me get this straight. No, wait. Let me get this straight. So I'm probably 5 or 6 years old, and I'm telling my dad I want a Sega Genesis, and Zorn did the commercials.
Yeah, they had 2 different commercials, but Zorn did one of the commercials.
Oh shit!
So that's
that is awesome.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, man.
Yeah,
is what it is all about.
It's like I just twisted off the Oreo, and it's just like yay! All right.
Well, what else we got?
So we're just gonna ravel these down.
Yeah.
So there's so many talented local metal and rock musicians across the United States, clearly.
Yeah.
But it seems that New York City falls behind in regularly producing younger, successful metal and rock bands.
Yep. Do you want to hear why?
Let me finish the question.
Okay, sorry.
I know.
I'm too keen to talk about it.
But this is awesome, though.
This is good.
But with that said, as Earache is based in New York City, obviously because we're here in Queens, what are labels looking for when scouting for new talent? And
other than having talent, before in
Zing!
Before in the 90s, the criteria would be you've at least made one album or a release on your own and have done at least one national tour. Because going on tour and all that separates the men from the boys, so to speak. And I've known guys and bands who have been like childhood friends, grew up together, just throw down on the side of the highway like, you told us we could wait to the next gas station before we filled up, you motherfucker.
Yeah.
Wow. So, NASA's spending millions on putting a bunch of astronauts in a tin can and locking them in there to see the psychological effects of long-term space travel. I'm like, just go talk to some bands.
Yeah.
Because it's the same thing. You're out in the middle of space, and you're just going to turn on each other or whatever.
Where's Keith Richards when we need him?
That was the criteria back in the 90s. You have to make a record, and you have to go on done your own DIY tour, because then because you don't want to spend $100,000 or more on developing someone just to have them fall to pieces the first time they leave out of their neighborhood.
Yeah, that's an absolutely horrible investment, especially back then.
Yeah. But I would say these days the criteria is... are you making the connection with your fans on Instagram, and do you have a ton of listeners on Spotify? Every day I get really, really talented, like really good music sent to me, and you go, okay, they've got all the links on their website, like click here for Instagram, click here for Spotify, and you go, it's like 14 monthly listeners. And it's like, no matter how much money a label can throw at you, if you aren't already naturally connecting with an audience, then it's I wouldn't say it's an impossible job, but it's like, we got me, Dig, and Dan, we got 30 plus years each in breaking bands, and even for us it would be a hard sell if you're moving something from a standing start.
It's just extra difficult at this point in time.
Yes, but harken back to New York City. I'm a great believer in scenes, and if you look at something like a place like Richmond, Virginia, so many great bands that come out of there, and one of the reasons is, Lamb of God, Gua, Municipal Waste, Darkest Hour, whatever, but one of the reasons is because it's a cheaper cost of living. Seattle in the early 90s, 4 or 5 guys could pile into a house, you pay like $500 a month rent, all you can do is like go bar back or like flip burgers twice a week, and you can spend
you
the
have
rest of the
enough
time
money
playing music.
Yeah, you have
Whereas
money for rent. And
a
do
lot
all
of people
that jazz.
move to New York to relocate. Like New York's where it's at, man. Metal sucks. Metal injection here. Blah blah blah. Yeah. But you're working 60, 80 hours a week. You can't rehearse in your house because you're in a tiny apartment. You have to pay for rehearsal rooms.
Yeah, and the rehearsal rooms go anywhere from like 200 or 500, depending on what you
Exactly.
need it for.
So it is so much more against you trying to, even though the media is based in New York and LA, there's so much more against you. I mean, look at someone like Slipknot. I mean, that was what, 98, 99, they kind of broke through or whatever.
Yeah.
Iowa, I mean, they even called a record that, because the thing is, before them, no one had ever come from Iowa. You know what I'm saying? But the whole internet leveled all that. Do you know what I'm saying?
It leveled the playing field.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jeez.
So you don't have to, because traditionally it was, you'd have to pack up everything. And I mean, like glam bands in the 80s, you got to get your ass to LA. You know, in the 70s, punk rockers, you got to get to New York or whatever. That was the thing. But, you know, so I think even though New York has got so much going for it, it's very, very tough to be a New York band and to break through. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely. And it's absolutely true because, you know, I didn't really take that into consideration, that living in New York City takes a lot away from, you know, your musicianship.
Yeah.
Just focusing on it when you have to work all the time. So that's very true. But also, I mean, talking about that also, I mean, about promotion as a local musician and, you know, saying like, okay, well, you know, you definitely promote yourself on social media and stuff like that. To do, I mean, what happens when that's not enough? Like, what happens if, you know, oh, well, I'm just gonna, you know, promote myself on social media. I mean, what more can you do besides that?
You can't,
if it doesn't end up working as
just.
You know.
I mean, there's that the fretting kid, you know, buying plays and buying this and buying that. Social media,
buying likes and all that.
Yeah, social media is a tool, and it's a very helpful tool if you use right. But you still have to do the old way. You could use that, and then, hey, shit, like Slipknot's coming to my town. Like, you got to put us on. We're the biggest local band. We're going to help bring people to the show. We're going to help whatever. You have to leverage that into getting into tours of national acts and whatever else.
Yeah, it's
you know what
at the end of the day, it's still a business. You know, you have to use the tool as a business aspect and make sure that if this is what you want, you have to go through it properly and help people understand how hard you're pushing this.
Well, you know, I was telling somebody a week before that Fretton story broke. Two stories on that. Is we were well aware in the MySpace days. It used to be bots, computer programs that could add 1,000 people a day to your MySpace. There was a famous case of a band in LA. I forget the name of the band. But they did some sort of bot on a YouTube video. They went to the Whiskey A Go Go, and we're the hottest band in LA. Look at our video. We got 7 million views on a YouTube video. They're like, holy shit! How come we haven't heard of these guys? You got a Tuesday night gig, and they booked them, and then 3 people turned up. So I was telling somebody a week before the Fretton story happened. So the same thing happened as we did the first Bring Me the Horizon record in the U.S. And they had 1 million fans. They were the first band we had that had 1 million fans on MySpace. And I'm like, come on. This is obviously a bot, but it was all legit, real, organic fans. And the first tour they did, I won't name the other bands. They were openers. 70% of the crowd left after they played because they were actual, like, Mom, you got to drive me to the gig, Mom, or whatever. And then it's like, all right, well, I'm picking you up at 10.
Good old days.
Yeah, and I'm picking you up at 10 o'clock and all this sort of thing. And they all left before the headliners came on. But I was like, shit, this is all legit. It's not faked. You can't, I mean, there's a saying in showbiz, fake it till you make it. Sure, you got to do that a little bit, but
not all the way.
Yeah, but what that kid did, I mean, he obviously has some brains to be able to create all this fake shit and hype up this and that. But he just, like, what was he expecting to go there?
Exactly.
And go, oh, it's a band from America, man. Let's go check it out. Like, it's got to do more than just that, you know?
We deal with that on a continuous basis. You know, it's just we're putting our work out as photographers, and it's just, you know, you either do it the legitimate, organic way, or you fake it till you make it. And sometimes it works, and then, you know, you have other people that just abuse the power.
Yep.
And it's
it's like at this point, it's very, very noticeable. You know, it's just the numbers they don't even out. You know,
it totally has.
When you get this much attention for your work, and then, you know, the followers stay different. it's really
Exactly. I mean, one of the things I look at when I had a band about 2 weeks ago hit me up, and they actually had some decent Instagram followers, and I was like, oh yeah, like, you know. But I actually, what I do then is I'll go look at a picture, and if it's got 800 likes, if there's only like one comment like cool or this is
it's
good,
a little fire symbol.
yeah, like that, you're like, yeah, right. But it was actually people interacting with them, and then say, okay, well, this is actually, there's something here, you know. And so that it's important, you know. But then again, as I said at the start of this question, is that means you don't have to be in New York, you don't have to be in LA, you can be in Iowa, you can be
in the middle of bloody nowhere.
Yeah, as long as you got a Wi-Fi connection, you know. So you said earlier on about why do you need a record company in this day and age? I still believe you do. I mean, there's people who have been predicting the death of CDs for a long time. I